that are really fundamental. Um, Thinking about a book I read once by Hillman, James Hillman, and it was called The Soul's Code, and he talks about this thing called the acorn, which is something you were meant to do or be. And some people miss.
Before his death, Robert Redford, one of Hollywood's most enigmatic and admired figures, finally broke his silence about his longtime friend and rumored love interest, Barbra Streisand. For decades, fans have speculated about the deep connection between the two icons. Their unforgettable chemistry in The Way We Were made them one of cinema's most beloved on-screen pairs. But behind that perfect Hollywood facade lay a story few ever truly knew. And before his final days, Redford decided it was time to speak the truth. For years, both Redford and Streisand avoided addressing the rumors, the whispers of unspoken affection, creative clashes, and emotional distance that followed them long after the cameras stopped rolling. But in one of his last interviews, Redford finally opened up. His words were honest, raw, and tinged with the melancholy of a man looking back on a life filled with brilliance, mistakes, and what-ifs. "She was extraordinary," he said softly. "Barbra had this light, a force of nature that could draw anyone in, but that light could also burn. We were two very different people, and I don't think we ever fully understood each other." For Streisand, The Way We Were was more than a movie. It was a memory, a love story that never quite ended. And for Redford, it became a symbol of something unfinished, something that time never allowed him to resolve. Now, with his passing, those final words about Barbra Streisand have taken on a haunting weight, a bittersweet confession from a man who, after a lifetime of silence, finally told the world how he really felt. When The Way We Were premiered in 1973, audiences were mesmerized. The story of Katie and Hubble, played by Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford, became one of the most powerful and enduring love stories in Hollywood history. But what few people realized at the time was that the chemistry between those two stars wasn't just acting. It was something deeper, something neither of them ever fully admitted until much later in life. In his final years, before his passing, Robert Redford finally spoke about the connection that existed between him and Barbra Streisand during those unforgettable months of filming. "Barbra was unlike anyone I'd ever met," he said quietly. "She was fierce, brilliant, and completely unafraid. That kind of energy. It stays with you." Their first meeting wasn't what most people imagine. Redford, already known for his reserved, introspective nature, was skeptical about working opposite Streisand. She was bold, outspoken, and known to take creative control, a personality very different from his quiet intensity. Director Sidney Pollack later admitted that Redford initially turned down the role, worrying that Barbra would dominate the picture, but fate had other plans. When they finally stepped onto the set together, something electric happened. Their scenes were alive with tension, passion, and a strange tenderness that blurred the line between fiction and reality. "You can't fake that kind of chemistry," Redford later admitted. "It's either there or it isn't." And with Barbra, it was always there. But their working relationship wasn't without challenges. Streisand, deeply emotional and driven, often wanted to dig into the heart of every moment. Redford, methodical and restrained, preferred subtlety over spectacle. This difference in style led to moments of quiet frustration on set. Yet, rather than tearing them apart, those creative clashes only made their performances more real. "The tension between us," Redford reflected, "was what made the story work. Katie and Hubble were never supposed to be easy, neither were we." Off camera, the two shared long conversations about life, love, and fame. Redford respected Streisand's relentless ambition, while she admired his grounded nature. "He had this calm that made everyone around him feel safe," Streisand once said. "But behind that calm, I always sensed sadness, like he was protecting something." As the filming went on, rumors began to swirl that their on-screen affection might have spilled into real life. Both stars denied it, but Redford's later comments suggested a deeper truth. "Sometimes," he said in a reflective tone, "you meet someone who changes how you see the world. It doesn't have to be romantic. It's just connection. And you never forget it. When the film wrapped, they went their separate ways. Both at the height of their fame, both aware that something between them had been left unresolved. For Redford, it was one of those rare bonds that transcended time and words. For Streisand, it became a lifelong what if, one she carried quietly for decades. In the years that followed, fans begged for a reunion, but Redford always resisted. The beauty of The Way We Were, he once said, was in its imperfection. Some stories are meant to stay frozen in time, and so they did. Two stars who shared something extraordinary but fleeting. It wasn't until his final days that Robert Redford finally spoke openly about what Barbra Streisand really meant to him, and the truth, as he revealed, was far more emotional than anyone imagined. Decades after The Way We Were had faded from theater screens, the story of Barbra Streisand and Robert Redford refused to die. Fans couldn't stop wondering what really happened between the two. Every reunion, every anniversary of the film reignited speculation. Yet both actors remained mysteriously quiet until the later years of Redford's life, when he finally began to open up about the truth behind their complex bond. By the late 1990s, Redford had settled into a quieter life away from Hollywood's glare. He focused on environmental activism, independent film, and his beloved Sundance Institute. But when asked about The Way We Were in interviews, there was always a pause, a long, thoughtful silence, before he spoke. Barbra, he once said softly, was one of the most extraordinary women I ever worked with. There was something about her energy that lingered long after we finished the film. Streisand, meanwhile, had achieved legendary status, an EGOT winner, an icon whose career spanned decades. Yet, when her autobiography was released, she too spoke of Redford with a kind of reverence that revealed more than she intended. He was so beautiful, she wrote, not just physically, but in the way he listened. He made you feel like the only person in the room. For years, fans hoped for a reunion film. Hollywood producers approached both stars several times, but Redford always declined. Some magic, he explained, can't be recreated. The story we told, that was our moment. If we tried again, it wouldn't be the same. Still, Streisand never hid her admiration. In a 2013 interview, she said, "Robert brought such quiet depth to that role. I don't think I've ever had that kind of connection on screen again." Behind the scenes, though, there were whispers of unfinished feelings. Close friends claimed that Redford had always carried a kind of bittersweet affection for Streisand, respect mixed with regret. He admired her fiercely, one longtime associate said, but he also knew they could never have worked as a couple. They were too different, too strong in their own ways. In his later years, Redford reportedly sent Streisand a handwritten letter, something deeply personal, reflecting on their time together. Though its contents were never made public, a source close to the family revealed it was a farewell of sorts, written when Redford's health began to decline. It wasn't romantic, the source said, but it was full of gratitude. He wanted her to know how much that part of his life had meant. When Redford finally spoke publicly about Streisand shortly before his death, his words were tender, yet tinged with melancholy. "There's something about her I'll never forget," he said. "We shared a truth in front of that camera, something raw and honest. You don't come across that often in this business." After his passing, Streisand paid tribute in her own quiet way. She posted a black and white photo from the set of The Way We Were, captioned with only 4 words, "Forever my Hubble Gardener." The world instantly understood. It wasn't just a movie role. It was a memory that had shaped both their lives. Even after all the fame, success, and years apart, their story remained one of Hollywood's greatest almosts. Redford may have lived a private life, but through that single confession, and through Streisand's simple farewell, fans finally caught a glimpse of the truth he had carried for decades. It was never about scandal or romance. It was about two artists who met at the perfect time, created something timeless, and then let it go. In the end, Robert Redford's final words about Barbra Streisand were not of regret, but of peace. "We gave the world a story about love that couldn't last," he said. Maybe that's why people still remember it, because deep down, we all have someone we never forget. Years after The Way We Were had cemented its place in cinematic history, Robert Redford and Barbra Streisand's connection continued to captivate audiences. The question everyone asked was always the same: was their on-screen chemistry real? And though they both remained guarded for decades, hints of the truth began to emerge as time passed, especially in Redford's later years. In private interviews and retrospectives, Redford spoke more candidly than ever before. His once youthful energy had softened into something contemplative. Barbra, he said during one of his final conversations, had a spark unlike anyone else. Working with her was both exhausting and exhilarating. You could never predict what she'd do next. That's what made her magic. Those who knew Redford well said that he rarely discussed personal feelings. Yet whenever Streisand's name came up, his tone would change, lighter, nostalgic, almost wistful. There was respect in his words, but also something deeper, something unspoken. "She challenged me," he once admitted. "Not just as an actor, but as a person. She made me dig deeper into emotions I didn't always want to face." On Streisand's side, the admiration was mutual. Despite her commanding presence and career achievements, she often looked back on The Way We Were with visible tenderness. In one rare moment of vulnerability, she confessed in an interview, "I fell a little in love with Hubble Gardner, and maybe a little with Robert, too. He had this quiet strength that drew me in." Through the decades, fans hoped for a reunion, a second collaboration, or even a stage appearance together. But Redford always turned the idea down gently. "You can't recreate lightning in a bottle," he explained. "That story belonged to a time and place. To try again would only take away from what we had." Behind the camera, however, their bond never truly faded. The two exchanged letters and occasional phone calls, often reminiscing about their time filming in the 1970s. Friends of both stars revealed that Redford remained protective of Streisand, even when others in Hollywood criticized her for being difficult or demanding. "She was a perfectionist," Redford said once, defending her. "But she cared deeply about the work. That's something I always admired." Their friendship endured quietly. Two artists who understood each other in ways only they could. When Redford's health began to decline, it's said that he grew reflective about the people who had shaped his life. Barbra's name often came up. In one of his last interviews, he was asked which co-star had left the biggest mark on him. He smiled softly and said only, "Barbra, because she made me feel alive in every scene." When Streisand learned of Redford's passing, she didn't issue a long public statement. Instead, she posted a simple photo of the two on set. Barbra gazing at him lovingly, and Redford looking away, that familiar melancholy in his eyes. Her caption was brief but powerful. "The way we were, forever." It was all the confirmation the world needed. Their story had never been about fleeting romance or Hollywood scandal. It was about two souls who met through art and created something eternal, a reflection of love's beauty and its impermanence. Even decades later, when Streisand performed the film's iconic theme song at a private event, her voice cracked slightly as she reached the line, "Memories may be beautiful, and yet..." Those who were there said she wiped away tears. Robert Redford had once said, "Some people come into your life for a moment, but that moment changes everything." For him, that person was Barbra Streisand, and for millions of fans around the world, their love story, though fictional, still feels heartbreakingly real. When the news of Robert Redford's passing broke, Hollywood fell silent. The man who had defined an era of quiet strength and authenticity was gone, leaving behind a legacy that stretched far beyond film. But for Barbra Streisand, the loss was deeply personal. Behind the poised exterior of an icon, she was mourning a man who had once shared with her something far more meaningful than fame: truth, artistry, and a rare emotional bond that time could never erase. The morning after his death, Streisand's team released a simple statement: "He was a true gentleman, kind, brilliant, and endlessly patient. I will always treasure the moments we shared." Those who knew her said the statement only scratched the surface. Privately, she was devastated. For years, Streisand had referred to Redford as her greatest co-star, but few realized how much that partnership had meant to her. In the weeks that followed, Streisand began revisiting their memories together. She watched old interviews, reread letters, and rewatched The Way We Were. Friends close to her revealed that she wept through the entire film. She said it was like watching a chapter of her life play out on screen, one friend confided. It wasn't just a movie to her. It was a time when she felt something she'd never felt before. At a private memorial held by Redford's family in Utah, Streisand quietly attended. She didn't speak publicly, but those who were there said her presence spoke volumes. When one of Redford's children read his favorite line, "Some stories are meant to stay unfinished," she reportedly wiped away tears. A few months later, Streisand honored Redford in her own way. During a concert in Los Angeles, she paused midway through her set and addressed the audience. "There's a song I've sung for decades," she said softly. "But tonight, it means something different." She began to sing The Way We Were, her voice trembling with emotion. As she reached the final chorus, the crowd stood in silence. No applause, just reverence. It was her goodbye. Hollywood, too, paid tribute. Directors, co-stars, and admirers shared their memories of Redford, but it was Streisand's heartfelt performance that captured the essence of what he meant to the world. The song, once about fictional lovers, had now become a memorial, a bridge between memory and loss. Later, in a rare interview, Streisand reflected on Redford's passing. "He was one of the few who understood me," she said quietly. "We didn't need to say much. It was always there between us. We had a connection built on respect and honesty. That's rare in this business." As time went on, her words became part of Redford's legacy. Film historians began to re-examine The Way We Were through a new lens, not just as a romantic drama, but as an echo of something real that existed between its stars. The story of Katie and Hubble was no longer just fiction. It was a mirror of two people who had briefly found something extraordinary in one another, and then had to let it go. In the end, Streisand's final tribute came not in words, but in silence. During an anniversary event marking 50 years of The Way We Were, she appeared briefly on stage. As a montage of scenes from the film played behind her, she simply whispered, "Thank you." Bob, that moment said everything. Their story, full of passion, distance, admiration, and unspoken love, remains one of Hollywood's most haunting connections. Robert Redford may be gone, but through Barbra Streisand's voice, his memory lives on. Together, they created not just a movie, but a feeling, one that continues to linger softly, beautifully, the way they were.